Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on digital inclusion of older persons, harnessing digital technologies to promote the inclusion and well-being of older persons. My name is Amin Lamrabat. I coordinate the NGO and outreach activities in my division for inclusive social development of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. We are very pleased that this webinar is taking place during the World Summit on the Information Society Forum 2020, which represents the world's largest annual gathering of the ICT for development community. So on behalf of UNDESA and my division, I would like to thank all of our partners, speakers, and the audience who are joining us today to discuss this important issue related to the digital inclusion of older persons. So before I start, I would like just to give you a short overview of the work of what we do in my division for inclusive social development. So we have unique global mandates on groups of people that have traditionally been left behind. So we deal with older persons, but with other groups like indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, young people, as well as issues, families, cooperatives, and sports for peace and development. We also promote teams on eradicating poverty, promoting employment, decent work, decent job, fostering inclusion, participation, and reducing inequalities. So we promote socially inclusive development by translating relevant international norms into policy and practice at regional, national, and subnational levels. And we also do technical cooperation, capacity development, and partnerships. Just to go back to the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, MIPA, it states that lack of access to technology that promotes independence and other socio-economic changes can marginalize older persons from mainstream of development. MIPA also recognizes that technology can be used to bring persons together and contribute to the reduction of marginalization, loneliness, and also segregation between the ages. So we are in the midst of the pandemic now, COVID-19, and going to its impact on our societies, in particular on the populations with vulnerabilities such as older persons. This crisis is still ongoing, and our response and recovery efforts to build back should be fully aligned with the vision of the SDGs and the MIPA. So digital technologies have the potential to create opportunities towards inclusive and sustainable development and provide tools to overcome the challenges faced by many to fully participate in the development process. Older persons are often among those that do not benefit fully from the benefits of ICT. That's why digital inclusion is now vital for older persons. So before we start, I would like to ask you to kindly keep your microphone on mute and the video turned off unless you are speaking. This will help to cut our background noises. So I now have the pleasure of inviting Ms. Daniela Bas for opening remarks. Ms. Bas is the Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development at UNDESA. Ms. Bas, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Amin, for the introduction of the activities of the Division for Inclusive Social Development in DESA, of which we are part. And distinguished panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all of you around the globe from New York. So good afternoon and good evening for those who are connected from the other side of the world. It is really my pleasure to welcome you to this event on the digital inclusion of older persons. At the outset, I would like to thank the panelists for participating in today's discussion, and I have no doubt that their extensive expertise will contribute to the success of this meeting. And what an opportune time to hold this event. First, because of the pandemic's drive change. As we know, COVID-19 has fast-tracked the digital transformation, further exposing us to the vast promise and peril of new technologies. Second, our goal is clear. We now have a new roadmap for digital cooperation that has been launched by the United Nations Secretary General in June. And the roadmap calls for action to connect, to respect, and to protect all people in the digital age. And the third, for the first time since its inception, the World Summit on the Information Society has dedicated a special track to older persons and ICTs, giving us the opportunity to have this discussion with all of you today. And you know, as I reflect on my time in office during the last 9 years since I joined the United Nations here in New York, I am full of passionate conviction in the importance of this topic to social development. Digital technologies have revolutionized the way we interact with each other, and we are now more globally connected and open to all things agile and innovative. The question we need to ask ourselves, though, is how can we enable digital technologies to be used in an inclusive manner, and making sure that technologies are here to serve us, the people, and not people here to serve technologies. So not to lose their human rhythm and force us to have the machine rhythm. Well, this will require and requires policy frameworks that direct support social inclusion, and it will require special measures to bring traditionally marginalized groups to the fore. It will also require engaging with governments and the private sector to invest in both human capital and infrastructures. So in this way, maybe a tall order, but the United Nations has the convening power to bring governments and stakeholders together to promote collective action. In fact, last week, my division held a meeting with experts from all over the world. There were something like 80 experts to prepare for the upcoming session of the Commission for Social Development that is going to be held next February 2021, where the priority theme is "Hear Well, socially just transition towards sustainable development, the role of digital technologies on social development and the well-being of all." Now, allow me to say a few words now, zooming in to older persons. In the next hour, we are going to explore and discuss the inclusion of older persons in digital technologies, the digital divide, and how this divide results in older persons often not benefiting fully from the opportunities provided by the technological progress. And this has been illustrated by the COVID-19 pandemic, where digital technology has been a lifeline for millions of people during this crisis. And digital technology has enabled access to healthcare, sure, made possible to, the continuation of education. That's very important. And ensure that the businesses can function by making use of teleworking. And it has also provided access to goods and services through e-commerce, and has enabled families and friends to be connected throughout months of physical distance, alleviating definitely social isolation. And it has allowed also meeting, people, and using meetings like this one, virtual ones, where we can exchange ideas and continue to engage in the work that matters to us. However, limited and non-inclusive access to these technologies by countries and groups such as older people means that many people are not only unable to take advantage of these opportunities, but also that pre-existing inequalities experienced by these groups are exacerbated. And as we call for the adoption of social policies to support full digital inclusion and digital equality for older persons, I must also highlight the need to ensure that the voices of older people who are not fully benefiting from digital opportunities are heard. I'm going to be 60 next year, so I belong to the group defined older people by the United Nations. We know what we need, so listen to our voices as well. And we lead by example, and are really very happy to have our panel today here at the United Nations on older persons who speak to about their own experiences and what their expectations and perspectives are. And I want also to address the private sector, allow me, because benefiting from their presence in our panel today, representing large technology companies like Google and a coalition of some of the world's leading brands, including Intel, Pfizer, Philips, Bank of America, and others. Well, I want to remind us all of the enormous potential that could be unlocked through public-private digital cooperation. And we look really forward to engaging further with you in the future. But beyond today's event, the United Nations Secretary General announced in the recently launched roadmap for digital cooperation that he plans to establish a multi-stakeholder digital inclusion coalition that is an informal network of like-minded member states, civil society groups, the private sector, and other stakeholders on digital inclusion. And I really encourage you all to engage in this coalition to help realize our collective goal of a future with affordable, accessible, usable digital technologies that will enhance social opportunities, lessen inequalities, promote sustainable development. Before taking the opportunity to welcome you once again and looking forward your ideas and discussions in today's meeting, I would like also to highlight a demographic aspect of our work. While there is a continent that it is still very young, and I'm talking about Africa, the majority of the other continents in the world are growing old very fast in terms of population. So we're not talking about a minority group here. We're talking about the fact that in the world, people aged beyond the 60 years are more than youth or children who are 5 years and less. It means that the world is rather old in terms of age. And so we really have to make sure that the world feels well. The people we serve and the countries we serve have to feel well, and they cannot be left behind. Thank you so much. Amin?
I'm mute, sorry. Thank you so much, Daniela, for your opening remarks. I now have the pleasure of inviting our speakers today. Each speaker has the limit of 7 minutes for their presentations. And after the speakers complete their presentation, we will have an interactive session for Q&A. I will remind all the speakers 30 seconds before their time is up. So thank you so much for your kind understanding and cooperation. Now, without further ado, I would like now to give the floor to our first speaker, Ms. Alison Bryant, Senior Vice President, AARP Research and Lead for Technology Work. She leads the Research Center and heads up the Technology Impact Area for AARP. And in the interest of time, I'm not going into all the details, but the full bios of all the speakers are available online. The floor now is yours, Ms. Bryant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amin. And I'm assuming you guys can see the screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. So I am really honored to be here this morning and to help kick off such a fantastic panel of colleagues who are all really focused on this issue. So as Amin mentioned, I wear 2 hats at AARP. I lead our research center, which focuses on all aspects of insights around older adults. And then I also lead our issue area around technology and the digital divide, again, sort of focused on older adults. So for those of you who aren't familiar with AARP, we focus on how do we help older adults live their best lives. That's really our focus, is empowering them. And that is everything from financial resilience to health security to being socially connected with others. And we sit in a very unique place, and this harkens to what Daniela said, where we have very strong ties with consumers, with governments and policy, and also with the industry. So we have 38 million members, or consumers, that we speak to on a daily and weekly and monthly basis. We work very closely and advocate very strongly for core issues for older adults, including things like broadband access at both the national US and the state level. And then we also work very closely with the industry, both in aggregating the marketplace of older adults, but also helping them to innovate and pushing them in areas like technology inclusion to really develop things that are useful for older adults, but also the broader population. So I want to start my presentation today by focusing on this idea of digital inclusion. And even though I'm at AARP and we focus on older adults, and I know that's the core topic that we're talking about, I really want to mention that digital inclusion is about designing for all ages. And it's about understanding unique needs across users. And one of the key things we know about older adults is nobody wants to have something, nobody wants to be pigeonholed and have to take that special device, right? It's just for them. They want to be able to use more broad consumer devices in the way that they need it. And I think, again, that harkens back to the sort of anti-technological determinist perspective that Daniela mentioned. The other perspective I'd love to bring up, and this is something that I saw the other day that I thought was really insightful, was if you're familiar with the Pareto principle, right? The whole idea that the 80-20 rule, right? In some respects, digital inclusion is flipping that. It's saying, look, if we can design for those 20%, for those unique needs, we actually will serve the broader population. The idea of universal design, right? If you design a sidewalk to be larger so that an older adult has a better chance to walk down with a walker, it's also going to be better for the mom with a young child in a stroller. But I think that's really the framework that we're trying to move forward. Now, to dive in a little bit more, I also want to focus on the fact that it's not just about age. So yes, age matters, but it's really much broader than that. It's about your life experience and your resources and the context in which you live and a whole host of other factors. So again, and the data I'm showing here is from recent research we did in the US, age does come into play. And in the US, we see about 70 is the critical cliff for technology adoption and use for the most part. So I think it's also important for us to figure out who are we talking about when we're talking about older adults, and when we want to focus on making the biggest impact, where are we going to put that focus? So for the most part, people who are 50 to 59 and even 60 to 69 look pretty similar from a technology use, at least in the US, to other folks. Why is that? Because of their life experience. They've been in the workforce when digital technologies were coming into play. They had email, particularly if they were, in certain types of positions. They may have had access to a BlackBerry or a smartphone for their work, again, depending on the kind of work that they were doing. So that thinking more broadly than just saying we're going to focus on age, but we're going to focus on different kinds of use cases. That is really a critical lens that I think I want to make sure that we're bringing to the table as we're having this discussion. Now, when we think about digital inclusion in older adults, there's 5 core barriers and then sort of a 6th issue that runs across many of them that we tend to focus on when we're thinking about what are the innovations we want to develop, what are the problems we want to solve for, where should we be targeting advocacy. And so those 5 areas are around design and user experience, awareness and interest of technology, cost and the acquisition of technology itself, installation and adoption, and this is a big one that we actually often see missing in policy, which is it's great to get technology in someone's hand, but it actually has to get installed and started to use on a more consistent basis. And then certainly issues of trust and privacy, which have been myriad across a lot of different platforms, and continued issues around that older adults tend to be hypersensitive to compared to other generations. And then again, across all these things, we have the issue of digital literacy that sort of can exacerbate some of these barriers. So I've given just a few examples of some of the opportunities that as we have been working with industry and consumers and policymakers, we've started identifying as potential opportunities or solutions to some of these. So for things like design and user experience, I know that Osa from Google is going to be talking more about that later on. Just including older adults in design and UX work. That's not something that happens for the most part. They're not a focus or even just included in a broader group very often. How do we, when we talk about awareness and interest and thinking about building the market, we've been doing a lot of research recently looking at images of older adults in technology. And we're finding that only 5% of images of older adults actually include technology. As you can imagine, that is not the reality of older adults. And so they're not seeing themselves represented even in the context of technology. So that's another barrier that we can do some work on. For cost and acquisition, how do we actually scale markets? Again, that's something we do a lot at AARP. How are we scaling these markets? Again, that's a reason for being inclusive, so we can actually reduce costs through inclusive design. How do we add installation as an add-on option when technology is purchased? That's another potential opportunity. Or in trust and privacy, a great conversation we had last fall with many industry members. One of the number one thing they were interested in was somebody helping them to develop a consolidated consumer privacy label, almost like, and this is not in every country, but the idea of a nutrition label that everybody could learn, and was very simplistic, but it made it very easy for companies to adhere to sort of openness around privacy. And then in digital literacy, one of the things that we focus on is, how do we think about certainly the functional uses, and Daniela mentioned things like telehealth, but also think about the fun uses. And we find the fun uses are often a gateway into functional. So if I'm teaching and I'm an older adult and I learn to video chat on my cell phone because of COVID and I want to talk to my grandchild, that skill, that ability to do that opens the door for me to then have a conversation with my doctor for my next health visit. So how do we leverage and engage older adults through fun means that actually can lead them into functional opportunities? So certainly COVID has amplified so many of these issues, and we've seen this in things like telehealth, we've seen it in education, and that's both for certainly younger folks who are in more formal education, but really on a lifelong learning curve. We've seen it be an issue in employment, and particularly around small businesses, and also around social and mental well-being. And I think that's one area where we at AARP have really seen a huge influx of concern.
Alison, sorry if I interrupt. You have 30 seconds.
No worries. I mean,
thank you so much. Thank you.
Wrapping up. That we see this. And I think importantly, this is not just an issue of the pandemic. We're seeing these things continue. So there's a lot of things that older adults are doing for the first time. So things like virtual volunteering, a little over half, and this is US data in the past month, have virtually volunteered for the first time, or about half have attended live events, or a third of them have video chatted for the first time. And what we're seeing is for all the things that they're doing, they absolutely want to continue these. So these changes are here to stay. How do we leverage this, not just as an inflection point, but really as an innovation and a transformation point around technology to say, it's very clear we need to do this. We're transforming as a society, but we need to get ahead of these issues so we don't actually exacerbate the divides that we already have. And again, I won't continue since I'm running out of time, but we know that there are continuing to be key areas of issues, things like telehealth, not knowing how to use telehealth, or being concerned about errors. So we do need to address these barriers as well as we continue this path in the different specific functional areas of technology. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Alison, for your excellent presentation. We will also post the presentation online for all of you. So we will have all the presentations online. And also, as you said, it's important to highlight that digital inclusion is about designing for all ages and understanding unique needs across users. So that's an important point to highlight. I now invite our second speaker, Ms. Heidrun Mollenkopf. She's a board member of BAXO, the German National Association of Senior Citizens Organizations, and Vice President of Age Platform Europe. The floor now is yours, Ms. Mollenkopf. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this rather timely forum. The past months have shown all too obviously how important digital inclusion is for older persons. Let me start my contribution to this panel with 3 short stories about some of my personal experiences with technology. In the next slide, please. The first story is about my first memory of a technical device. I grew up in Germany during World War II, and I remember me as a little girl sitting together with my mother in front of the radio for hours, listening to the newscaster who announced the expected flight paths of enemy bomber squadrons. It was of utmost importance to know whether our city would be a potential goal of a bomb attack and to get ourselves to safety in due time. The second story happened about 20 years later. My husband and I were just married and had moved to a new built apartment at a new place of residence. We had no telephone because in the 60s, you had to apply for one and then wait, sometimes for weeks, even for months, until you got it. So when I was pregnant with our first child, one night I felt stabbing pain. My husband had to run to the only telephone booth of the village to call the doctor. The third episode happened just a few weeks ago. Last May, my 3 grandchildren had their 21st birthday, but no birthday party was possible due to the pandemic. The only solution to meet and celebrate them was digital. So we organized a virtual birthday party, assembling all brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles to congratulate and give 3 cheers for the birthday children. Next slide, please. Why do I tell you all this? I think the 3 episodes showed that the circumstances and preconditions of communication have changed a lot. The technology or media for communication have changed enormously. But the significance of having adequate information and communication technology available for getting essential information, for accessing vital healthcare, or for maintaining meaningful social relations does not change. Next slide, please. On the contrary, as our world is noticeably transforming into an increasingly digitalized world, it is more significant than ever to have adequate, accessible, and trustworthy ICT available, and to have the capacity to use it. Unfortunately, this is not a given condition, as we already heard, neither for all states or regions, nor for all members of society. We know that older persons are less often equipped with digital communication technology. They use the internet less frequently than younger persons, and the digital divide between generations increases with age. Also among older persons themselves, there is a gap. For instance, between the well-educated, more prosperous people and the less educated and less wealthy ones. Between older men and older women, and between comparatively healthy persons and persons with disabilities. And often we can see a reinforcing intersectionality between those conditions, leading to multiple discrimination and exacerbating social inequalities. However, the right to information, to healthcare, and to social participation must be applicable to all persons without any limitation. Next slide, please. To close the gaps, improvements are necessary at 3 levels: the technical, the structural, and the social level. As for the technical level, primarily the designers and manufacturers of the technologies and digital services are in demand. Technological devices and mobile application software must be barrier-free and well-operating. Public digital health and social services in particular have to be designed in such a way that these services are easily accessible for all, in compliance with data protection regulations and safeguarding a person's privacy. At the same time, the provision of the technical prerequisites alone is not sufficient. At the structural level, a number of measures are needed as well. As the internet has become an indispensable element of public services of general interest, it is the task of the governments at national, regional, and municipal level to guarantee their citizens access to digital services and offers. This includes an efficient broadband network with free, reliable, and universally accessible Wi-Fi access, also in remote rural areas. To close the social gap, several measures are needed in addition to those already mentioned. Independent living, adequate healthcare, and social participation increasingly demand the availability and use of digital technologies. That is why it is crucial to ensure that those who need it get the financial and technical support to acquire or make use of the necessary prerequisites. Media literacy is another prerequisite for digital participation. Many older men and women have not had the opportunity to learn the necessary skills to autonomously navigate in the digital world. And conventional educational institutions usually no longer reach older persons. For this reason, more informal learning opportunities need to be created that go beyond vocational training objectives. Instead, topics or curricula referring to digital participation must connect to issues of the everyday life of older persons and provide meaning for them. It goes without saying that educational offers must also consider older persons' different levels of knowledge, their learning biographies, and their cultural and individual diversity. Next slide, please. In view of the tight schedule, I can touch all these issues only in a very superficial way. But what I wanted to convey to you is that the increasing digitalization of all areas of life is creating new opportunities and at the same time new risks for older persons. And that legal regulations that would take both aspects into account have been lacking today. Older persons' right to information, to healthcare, to education, to social integration and societal participation under the conditions of the digitalized societies is not yet sufficiently covered by law. And therefore, as an association of senior citizens organizations, we as BAXO call on our federal government in first place, but on the international community as well, to take the necessary steps towards the adoption of an internationally binding legal instrument to protect the rights of older people. And quite relevant to our current debate.
Sorry, Hayden, you have 30 seconds.
Yes, the last slide, please, the last one. We will promote this call at an international online conference organized jointly with the German Federal Ministry for Family Affairs and Senior Citizens and with Age Platform Europe on strengthening older people's or older persons' rights in times of digitalization. Lessons learned from COVID-19. It will take place on September 28th in the afternoon and 29th in the morning. And it will include a joint statement from civil society to the EBSCO Council conclusion under the German presidency on human rights, participation, and well-being of older persons in the area of digitalization. We would be glad and delighted if you could join us to participate in this conference. Thank you and hope to see you there.
Thank you so much, Haydn, for sharing with us these inspiring stories. I think it's more significant now than ever to have accessible and trustworthy ICTs available and to have capacity to use it. So that's a very important point to highlight. I now invite Mr. Michael Hodin. He is the CEO of the Global Coalition on Aging, managing partner at High Lantern Group, and a fellow at Oxford University Harris Manchester College. The floor now is yours, Ms. Hodin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's both an honor and a pleasure to be part of this. I hope all of our participants are having as much fun as I am in listening to my colleagues. And Danielle Abbas, your opening was just fabulous and inspirational. Thank you very much, but to all of you. I'd like to just make a few points. The first one is that here today in 2020, of course, we're all recognizing that COVID-19 pandemic has been nearly as much an all-consuming transformational moment as ever in history. Nevertheless, 2020 is also marked by the decade of healthy aging. We sit here today where the World Health Organization and the UN itself, led of course by UNDESA, Danielle and Amal and Amin, thank you very much, passed the resolution and accept that over the period from 2020 to 2030, we now have the decade of healthy aging, which will join the Sustainable Development Goals as part of our global community. Why is this? There are two basic points that Danielle, of course, you began to highlight, but let me just emphasize. Number one, we have the miracle of longevity that is now with us in the 21st century, not least as a result of all the medical, sanitation, environmental benefits that we bring from the 20th century. Where now, as every society modernizes, every society, middle income, poor, and rich societies, we appreciate that we live to 100 as a matter of course. This is happening more and more. But the second part is the one that Daniela, you mentioned, and in many ways, even the more impactful, which is the aging of society itself. We have more old than young today on the planet, and it's happening in country after country. So the decade of healthy aging is itself focused on these two powerful elements of the megatrend that informs our work. And from a global coalition point of view, we join this with the private sector, business itself, and of course, ICTs are at the center of a lot of what we're engaged in. The center of the decade of healthy aging is about a healthy and active aging, and ICTs can help us enable that. I would suggest we think about this in three ways. One is, of course, healthcare, and we've all alluded to the innovation that's taking place. Telehealth and telemedicine, of course, is in many ways at the center of this, and through COVID-19, we've seen advances in weeks or months that would normally take 10 years or more. But two others are at least as important, because healthy and active aging are two parts of the same engagement. And as we remain more active, as we get older, we'll also be healthier. So consumer spending and engagement. An 84-year-old friend is purchasing her thermometer and her paper towels from home through PayPal or whatever device she is using. This is happening daily. It's happening more and more. And then thirdly, education and entertainment. And the Hydran, I loved your reference to the 21st birthday. Many of us are experiencing Zoom weddings where older members of the family are able to participate in a way that maybe they couldn't, when we didn't have this technology engagement. The Global Coalition on Aging at its center is bringing business to the table of the opportunity for an older population. And our core element is we think that not only those who are members of the Global Coalition, and you mentioned the financial service sector, home care, technology, pharmaceutical and healthcare, but virtually everyone should have an aging strategy. We have roughly a $15 to $17 trillion silver economy. This is a huge opportunity. And when we think about it from an employer side and often focus on what the needs and wants of an older adult is, yes, it's about staying healthy. Yes, it's about remaining more active. Yes, it's about having a happy and engaging life. But oftentimes it's about having a job. What does a 60, a 70, even an 80-year-old want today as much as anything? It's engagement. And that could include a job, and that's enabled through ICTs. I have a friend, Alan Patrikoff, who is 84 years old, and he's one of the more successful and well-known articulate venture capitalists based here in America, but operating globally, obviously. He now has his third career. Just about a week ago, launched Prime Time, which is a venture capital for aging, bringing in older people who want to engage in the economy and enabling new and different innovative, including technologies. So I would conclude by simply saying that everything society tends to think about older people is pretty much wrong. And when you think about it too, we've put all of us in the same demographic category. So if we're talking about 60 to 100 in the context of 21st century longevity, that's like putting everyone from 20 to 60 in the same category, which of course no one does. So let's also understand and think about the diversity and the needs of a 60 or 70-year-old with respect to economic engagement versus the needs of perhaps a frail 87-year-old, all of whom will be enabled by ICTs. So I put this question to my fellow panelists and to all of us. How do we enable all organizations, business and public, private sector and public sector, to have an aging strategy? It's one that understands the opportunity from the external environment. And if you're a business and you have an aging strategy where you think you can enhance your business development and revenues, it might help to have a 70-year-old on your marketing team, which you can do through enabled digital technology. That person no longer has to come into an office unless they want to. But the opportunities are enormous, and the diversity of an age-friendly environment is what the Decade of Healthy Aging is all about. We have in many ways, one of the individuals who was at the center of this, Dr. John Beard, who left the WHO a couple of years ago. John is now chair of our Global Coalition on Aging Advisory Council, and he is advising us on this. And as John has said, one of the centerpieces of the Decade of Healthy Aging is to reimagine and reframe how we age, change work and retirement ideas, enable healthy and active aging, think about functional ability, not just absence of disease. Because as we age, we want this functional ability, and we want to engage, we want fun, we want happiness, and many who are older want jobs. So thank you very much.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I'm finished. Thank you. And again, it's a pleasure and a delight to be part of this.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike, for your inspiring presentation. And like you mentioned, around the world, people are living longer. So it's important to promote active aging, especially now that we have so many services available online, like online shopping, you said, telemedicine, and others. So for example, teachers, caregivers, and entrepreneurs are essential in every society. So we cannot afford to exclude older persons from these critical roles. So we need an aging strategy, like you said. I now invite Ms. Ozariem Omokaro. She's a user experience researcher at Google. She leads developer research globally to inform product strategy and innovation on Firebase. It's a Google platform for mobile developers. The floor now is yours, Oza. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dessa. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Amal and Amin, for this opportunity to share my perspective today. User experience is really about building empathy. It's about taking into consideration the full context of the user and using that context to design and build technology that they love and they use. As a user experience researcher at Google, I learn about software developers around the world, and I represent their voices in all the products that we build. I founded a platform called Black Chic Tech that uses fashion and lifestyle as a way to demystify technology for minority women in technology. I'm also very closely related to the issues of aging as a member of the board of directors of the Deva Mokara Foundation. This is an organization involved in the advocacy for the rights of older persons in Nigeria and in sub-Saharan Africa. And when I'm not working, I volunteer to teach kids in low-income communities about technology. And again, demystifying technology for them to make it interesting and make it engaging for them to use technology. So all of this, my life and my work experiences have put me right at the center of technology, inclusion, and older persons. In 7 minutes, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that I see with digital inclusion of older people. And I will talk about solutions that software companies, governments, and also older persons themselves can start to use to increase the engagement with technology for older persons. There are 4 challenges, and the first is assumptions. A lot of assumptions are made about older persons and their use of technology. Aging is stereotypically framed as a problem that technology needs to intervene and fix. Older persons are often associated with frailty, cognitive decline, and healthcare needs. And the danger in assumption is that when it's taken as fact, it reduces the perspectives and the voices of the people that are involved in the process. Now, because of these negative assumptions and ageism, older people are then excluded from the product research and the product design process. Majority of the technology that is designed today is designed for older people in the terms of care. It's designed for caregiving and for caregivers to help older people. But in the research, it's the perspective of the caregivers that are taken into consideration, not necessarily the perspectives of the older people. Much research doesn't take into consideration the heterogeneity of older persons. And in countries and places like Africa, we find that, if you're no longer generating income, most of the society doesn't really care about your opinion and they don't ask you what you want. Now, because the voices of older people were not included in the research and the product development lifecycle, when the technology actually gets to the hands of older persons, it's perceived as not useful. And it's also perceived as, not easy to use. In technology, there's a model called the technology acceptance model, and that says that adoption of any technology is as a result of the perception of ease of use and the perception of usefulness. And so we see it in today's digital technologies where, you know, the affordances and the accessibility is not geared towards older people. So you have the very small screens, you have tiny font sizes, and you have all these colors that are not good for people who either are colorblind or who are starting to lose their sight. Yeah. So excluding people and not taking into consideration their perspectives leads to a low adoption and acceptance of technology. And then on top of that, you have local context. So in this case, I'm speaking from an African perspective. You have the infrastructure and you have the access issues that we have in Africa. The poverty level is really high. And in some cases, it's the difference between buying food and actually buying technology, right? So technologies exist, mobile phones exist, and they are pervasive. So they are even in the rural areas. But you have cases where data is very expensive and they cannot afford to actually buy data to use their phones. There are power outages, so like battery life doesn't help with the use of technology. And finally, there is digital literacy. 50% of the older persons in Nigeria are in the rural areas. And unfortunately, the intergenerational synergies that would have helped with the adoption of technology is almost non-existent because of the rural to urban migration of youths to find jobs. So these are all the issues that, you know, and the challenges with the inclusion of older persons with digital technology. But the good news is that there are actually solutions. And I believe that it's a shared responsibility between the product development companies, the government, and the older persons themselves to actually work together to solve these problems. The first solution I have is to listen to older persons. Inclusion of older persons in the design process is really, really critical. And recognizing that involving older persons in the research and product design that could potentially impact their lives is a human right. It is their human right, and it should be done by every company that is producing technology today. Companies should challenge their ageist assumptions. So older persons above the age of 65, they are not a homogeneous group. They come from different backgrounds, they have different capabilities, they have different motivations and personalities, and they have different levels of use with technology. So you have the basic users, maybe who can only use technology for calls. You have the go-getters who are actually on social media, like the Facebooks and Instagram and on Google. And then you also have the savvy users who are early adopters of new technology. And so there's a broad range of people that can be included in the research of older persons. A suggestion is to design for accessibility of older persons, co-design with them, bring them into the conversation, and design technologies that are accessible to them and also have better affordances. And we also find that, you know, a lot of the technology of older persons has been focused on care, but not a lot of attention has been paid to active daily living. You know, we're still living today, they still have lives to live and things to do. So we need to build technology for more active living, like managing our finances, medication, shopping, technology for fun that helps with shopping, that helps to learn a new skill that can help to reduce stress. These are all the technologies that we can start to consider to build for older persons. So including older persons promotes dignity, you know, and it also amplifies their voices and reduces the stigma that comes with technologies that are not suited to them. The second point is to reframe the narrative. So this is a picture in Haiti. When I go to teach kids about technology, they're often very afraid. Initially, they are intimidated by the technology because it seems like a black box and they don't know what's in it. But one approach is to take the technology out of the picture and just engage them with their own personal stories. So what I do is I ask them to, you know, besides technology, what do you want for yourself? What do you want for your life? What do you want to see in your community? And have them actually write their stories down. And when that's done, you see them get excited because now they understand that technology can be used to help them achieve the things that they wrote down for themselves. Technology is a tool for lifelong learning. It's a tool to help become independent for longer. And it's also a tool for storytelling and legacy. So this is my message to older persons themselves, is to reframe the narrative. You know, ask yourself, what do you want for your life? What do
Sorry,
you,
Osa, you have 30 seconds. Thank you.
so what do you want to feel? You know, what message do you want to leave for your grandkids? And then start to think of technology as a way to help you achieve that. And then finally, digital skills. Because I mentioned the intergenerational synergies no longer exist, so it needs to be a deliberate attempt for the government to ensure that there's infrastructure, to fund intergenerational digital centers, to fund local entrepreneurs to build apps for the specific local context of older persons. And also to leverage the existing support system. There are a lot of support systems that exist in places like Africa. Start to leverage that for community building and for, you know, intergenerational centers for technology. And finally, there are a number of different incentives that we can provide to older persons to help them start to engage in technology. Value is one. When they see the value of the technology, they tend to be more engaged. Recognition, social connections, and also competition in some cases. You know, when you see one person doing it and engaging, you might also be interested in, you know, doing the same thing. And so these are ways we can start to engage older persons to use technology for their good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your inspiring presentation, Osa. I will now open the floor to Q&A. Please make sure to include your name and organization before asking a question. You can also share with us comments and resources using the chat box. And while we are waiting, I will ask the first question to Alison. Alison, you attended the World Summit on Information Society last year. Can you share with us your experience and how the summit came to dedicate a special track to older persons and ICTs this year?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, we had a really fantastic group last year in Geneva when we could meet in person that met to discuss this issue. And it was very clear after all the presentations and the discussion with the audience that there was really a need to have a lot more focus on this. We had a lot of ground to cover. And so from there, we were able to sort of leverage that into having more of a focus. Also, of course, with the amazing work you folks have been doing all the time since then, to continue to make this a really critical issue for us to address.
Okay, thank you so much, Alison. I have a question for Haydon. Is it necessary to articulate access to technology as a specific internationally recognized human rights for older persons that must be protected?
Well, I think yes, because this is a new thing. We have not had this for many years or for centuries. And, but it is becoming an ever more means to manage your daily life, to manage your health and almost everything. So if we want equal treatment to everybody and as a right, then equal access to technology is also a human right. The opposite is a bit more tricky, I think. Would it also be a right, or should it be a right, to live without technology? Can you be forced to use technology? Because, for instance, it's not enough staff available in a hospital. So then you get a robot to care for you. Is this possible? Or should it be a right to age without technology? I think these are almost philosophical questions which need a broader discussion.
Okay, thank you so much, Haydon. We have a question for Osa. Older persons need to remember so many passwords, and the concern that when upgrades happen, prior data might be lost or changed to an inaccessible format. What could be done about that?
So with current digital technologies, there are so many ways to get access to your digital devices that don't actually require passwords. There is facial recognition, there are fingerprint options, and there's also voice activation so that you don't have to enter a password. It just recognizes who you are and gives you access. So that's one way. The other way is there are actually apps that help you store your passwords so you don't forget them. They encrypt the passwords, store them, and you can use them across all your devices to make it really easy. Those are some of the it helps.
Mike, you want?
I mean, yeah, so just a comment on that. It's an excellent question. But as I do, I'd like to again thank ITU and WSIS for the Global Coalition on Aging to be their partner this year in developing and creating this aging track, or older persons track, excuse me. And to remind everyone that we've had a session yesterday, Monday, and there are sessions that we're bringing through WSIS to the world tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday as well. So everyone should go on the WSIS website and look for the Global Coalition on Aging partnership for the remainder of the week. We're delighted to be part of this. The point that I wanted to make, it's an excellent question, and I will refer to a session we had at the European Union in fall of 2019, when we were reviewing the Silver Economy Forum that the Global Coalition and Finnish government jointly sponsored in Helsinki as their EU presidency. And the main point that was made was the importance of emphasizing innovation and de-emphasizing regulation. So we all know the concerns about privacy and data protection, and I will not get into that debate here, but even representatives at the European Union at that time acknowledged that maybe in Europe they've been spending more time focused on the regulations and less space on innovation itself. And particularly with respect to ICTs and older persons, but for everyone. Innovation is critical. We can then manage the other pieces of it. But where we focus on regulation, it tends to be a barrier to the innovation that we need, including the code design that everyone has talked about.
Okay, thank you so much, Mike. Also, I have another question for you. What role does the private sector innovation have in bridging the digital divide for older persons in the middle and low income countries?
Thank you. Every one of the companies that are part of Global Coalition on Aging, and for other businesses, including I would suggest Google, as each of those companies focus on innovation, which is benefiting their bottom lines, that will also then lead to new innovation and opportunity that will be scaled globally, including for poor and middle income countries. And so we're very confident that as we get these technologies and businesses that are involved in them, they will surely, through their infrastructure, the global companies of whom certainly have operations in all countries around the world, and will then scale it to everyone's needs. You're on mute, I mean, still.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. Alison, I have another question for you. The panel talked about the digital divide. However, some attribute this divide to internal characteristics of older persons, such as lower computer literacy levels or technophobia. What role does ageism have in this conversation?
Absolutely, I think it's really foundational to it. And I think Osa did a great job of elucidating some of that, these ageist notions that we have are really outdated, not even outdated, they never were dated. Perceptions of older adults create sort of systemic reasons or ways in which we end up developing the wrong things, right? Not including them because we sort of ostracize them over to the corner. So I think actually ageism is foundational to this broader issue. And I think that also gets to what Michael was saying, which is also this, these issues are conflated, and you see them popping up in so many other sectors, right? Whether it's in the workforce, whether it's in health, you really can't separate them. I think they're absolutely part of the same issue.
Okay, thank you so much, Alison. I have also another question for Åsa. Can you give us examples of how tech companies has involved older persons in product development and what changed as a result?
In research, we again try to understand the full context of the user. So we you know, invite them for studies, interviews. We visit their local context and understand what their, you know, environments and what they need. And then that gets fed back into the product development life cycle. So to the designers, to the product managers, you know, and it's a cycle of continuous engagement, continuous usability studies to make sure that products are used and are useful to the people that use them.
Okay, thank you, Åsa. One more question we'll have for Haydon. Your organization calls on manufacturers and developers to focus on the careful handling of their users' data. So when it comes to older persons, what does that entail and why is it important?
Well, many older persons are concerned that they may find themselves in situations that they cannot cope with, or even may become victims of fraud, that their data can be misused. And when I think of the manufacturers and designers of the traditional technologies, they must secure, they are obliged to make their product safe and secure, that they cannot do any harm to the people who use it. But this has changed with data security, because this is a new phenomenon. And we have no regulations about this. And I think that especially with respect to financial data or health data, they are very sensitive for older persons, and they absolutely have to be protected. And it's not enough that the users themselves have to care for the security. I think it should be self-evident that those who offer these services have to take care that they can guarantee the data security, and that people themselves can decide who has access to the data and who not. This is absolutely a must, I think. And this has to change. This has to be really a paradigm shift, because until now, this does not exist, such a regulation.
Okay, thank you so much, Haydon. I think we have to conclude now. Daniela, would you like to add a few words to conclude? Thank you.
Thank you all. Can you hear me, Amin and colleagues?
Yes.
Lovely. Well, it has been fascinating. And I'm really thankful that I organized my calendar to be able to attend the meeting from the beginning to the end. I have learned so much more than what I thought I could have learned in such a short session. I have been following also the chat. I do not know whom among the panelists can see the chat, but trust me, it has been very lively. Lots of questions and engagement from people from all over the world, from Cameroon to the Philippines to Europe. I mean, it's amazing what I've been seeing here happening. I would like also to remind you all that the Commission for Social Development will take place next February 2021. The theme will be around the people, social development, and digital technologies. And I like very much the idea of reimagining and reframing how we use technologies and digital technologies, traditional technologies and digital technologies for the well-being of everyone, making sure that they are affordable, accessible, usable by all people of all ages and of all abilities. I prefer to leave this at home and bring abilities to the discourse, so these abilities. Definitely, when it comes to digital technologies, let's remember that they are at the service of people and not people at the service of technologies. We do need to educate everyone in any case. Would they wish to use technologies? And it was also raised the issue of, is it also a right not to have to use technologies? So that was a little bit more of a philosophical approach, but definitely, it shouldn't be a must, although most probably in the years to come, it will become something normal, maybe accepted by everyone, who knows? But even in that case, we have to remember that people are at the center of our efforts. That's what we do at the United Nations. The UN Charter says that we're here to serve the people. So technology is included. Thank you all, and I hope to see you again next February.
Thank you so much, Daniela, and thank you so much everyone in joining us in promoting the issue of digital inclusion of older persons. And before I think we conclude, there is one video that might play by our WSIS organizers that also we would like to thank them a lot for their support to our work.
If I may, Amin, sorry, but I really have to thank my colleagues. I have to thank Masumi. I have to thank Amal, the amazing work behind all of this. I have to thank Amin, whom you have seen. Amal has been behind the scenes the whole time, and all the others. I can't list them all, but I really have to thank my colleagues in the division. I have the honor to lead the Division for Inclusive Social Development in UN DESA. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. So we will see the video now. You can play. Okay, thank you so much again, everyone, all our panelists, as well as participants. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you and bye. Thank you very
Thank you.
much for making this possible. Thank you.
Thank you.